You're watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. The live stream. Detroit is different in Bridge Detroit. Local politics of Detroit. Redistricting. What map was voted upon? Why was that map chosen? And what was that discussion like in City Council?
Yeah, so after a couple of months, I think this process started really in like November of last year. They have finalized city council district maps that will take place after the 2025 municipal elections. So nothing changes for now. Your district remains the same. Your city council member remains the same until the next election. Yeah, they chose the sixth and final option that was created by the Planning Commission. It was actually a special request of the council president to create maps that looked a little bit, well, basically, the idea was try to make it as close as possible to what is currently the district boundaries. What's tricky about this, and it's required by the city charter after the release of census data every 10 years, and has to be kind of based on population changes. And the districts have to be as close to equal in population as possible. What's tricky about this, though, is there was a big population loss on the east side of the city compared to the west side. So proportionally, those east side districts had to get bigger to basically contain more people to make them more equal. And that caused kind of cascading changes for the other districts. Um, Pros and cons. There were some folks that came out of this process feeling like they were able to retain the boundaries that they thought were important. There were other neighborhoods that were not as lucky and will find themselves in new districts. What's been kind of interesting to me as we've been talking to folks about this is like how emotional people get over these lines on paper, right? Because it's connected to really their block level efforts to organize and get resources and build relationships with the city. So when folks come out from the Gricksdale Farms neighborhoods or where we are in Hope Village and they say we really want to remain in D2, that's important to them because they've worked with people at the community advisory council. They've worked with their city council member. They have these kinds of relationships, and I think it's yet to be seen what happens. These won't take effect for a little while, but does this really affect how easy it is for people to get help, the momentum that they've been building in their neighborhoods? There's some anxiety about whether that could disrupt some of the work that they've been doing.
I personally think, as a board member of Hope Village Revitalization and a resident in Hope Village, the community, I definitely know Jeff Jones was one of those people that was down there and saying like, yo, I don't support this map process. Every map I saw, 1 through 6, had my neighborhood now a part of District 5. But when you even look at the original map, it's kind of like we're a cluster that kind of sits on the outside of District 5. So moving forward, the momentum, just so people get the perspective of this, similar to what we were speaking about last week with redistricting, is the relationships. You've built relationships. There are projects that are ongoing. One of the big projects here is it will be an equestrian farm coming in the footprint of what was Paul Robeson Academy. I don't know if a lot of people know that. Like, where is that? Linwood and Finkel, like that area. So if people are familiar with my neighborhood, that equestrian farm is a big project for our neighborhood. And in D2, but now in D5, we're downtown, we're midtown. It's a lot of other projects that we could look at just from a lot of the way resourcing has been delivered throughout the city and say, we're not going to get those same considerations because this would have been amazing in D2, but now in D5, it'll be looked at and possibly lost in the sauce. And you all posed a really good question, like, where do these maps really matter? Other things that really happen too is then we have to look at it from the other angle and lane. If the districts stay the same, which they won't because this is census stuff, and then you look up and you continue to end up with like certain districts that may have, let's say 30, 40,000 less residents, but just as much influence. So what impact does that have? Or maybe less influence. It'll be less thought about. Like, I I understand the principle of what it is. There were many variables of that went into the drawing of the maps, as I saw one of those presentations, and from the planning commission. It's you want to keep the integrity of these communities, and technically, if the community is on the border of it, it's not like now that like part of the district is in D1 and the other is in D4. You know what I'm saying? It will compromise, that organization working together. It just changes the variance, and possibly that means that maybe that organization could have more power. I mean, it's so many ways to look at this. It could be just as many positives as negatives. It just all depends on the organizing and what resources could be there.
Yeah, I mean, similarly to some of the arguments that are being made on redistricting at the state level,
Yeah.
if you were to be optimistic about how D5 has changed, you would say, well, now not now, but after the next
Yeah.
election, if let's just assume all the council members stay the same, which they won't, we
Mhm.
know they're not going to. People are not going to run for re-election; they'll run for other offices. People will run against them, whatever. Today D5 is represented by the council president. So optimistically, you could say, okay, here we are. We're in D5 now. Maybe that means that we have a better chance of getting things passed because she has more political influence, right? Mr. Jones, also, he to what you were kind of talking to, the mix match of the kind of economic situation people in these different neighborhoods, right? So you've got Hope Village, then you also have in D5 these new maps will include, East Village, as you mentioned, it'll include downtown, Midtown. It'll include a lot of these interests. I mean, it spreads basically from this northwest corner that we're in here all the way to like Connor Creek. So it's a pretty wide, and all of these, there's little nuances we kind of into here, but yeah, I think these maps are really important. And what's important too is that whoever is representing them actually understands what's going on, in the neighborhood level. They understand the dynamics there and are able to actually listen to them. That was kind of what he ended with. Jeffrey Jones was like, look, don't forget about us as you work on these other things. Don't forget about what we've got going on here. But Sherry Burton from Midwest Civic Council of Block Clubs, a little bit further south on the west side here, was pretty satisfied that she was able to stay in D6. And, she talked about this a lot too, that basically you build this kind of circle of block clubs and local people that are really invested in doing things and fixing up and bringing resources down. And they've already kind of been through this wave of disinvestment. And so that kind of context, that historic, like we've spent all this time trying to build back up. That's where a lot of the worry comes from. But she feels good that she's able to maintain in D6 and keep those relationships going. So
Yeah.
we're going to see a lot of like little stories like that at the micro level. And I'm interested to kind of hear more from people about how this actually affects them.
Definitely. Definitely.